UAP, unidentified anomalous phenomenon. Are they extraterrestrial, interdimensional, time travelers in origin, or are they simply a result of top-secret military projects, false flag alien invasions, PSYOP, drones, or other human-made aircraft? Join the discussion now on UAP Crossfire.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to UAP Crossfire, a downsized edition today, as our brother Chris is at MUFON, and he's discussing alien hairstyles and hygiene there, I believe, in a presentation he's making. And our brother Don is not feeling well today, and so we are keeping him and his wife in our prayers. I know that their dog is having surgery tomorrow, and that's also heavy on their hearts. So be thinking of Don Ecker and Vicky Ecker as you have your morning ablutions, as they say. But joining me here and holding down the fort with me is Commander Cobra. Commander, how are you tonight?
Good evening, sir. And, we've talked about this on and offline over the past. The power of prayer and good intentions goes a long way. And for our two co-hosts that are not with us, I ask the greatest audience on the planet to keep everybody in their hearts and in their prayers and in their intentions, however you do your meditations there, because it does have a positive effect. And I love those two guys dearly, and they're good friends. And I'm sure Chris is probably right at the part with the alien space curlers right about now as we speak. So we can only hope that he's showing the intergalactic wave and gel part before it's all said and done. And Don, I hope you're watching tonight. That indeed, we have something very special tonight. Before I jump into that in intro, because Skywatcher's off stage, getting ready to bring it online. KGRA is selling merchandise. There's stuff coming out. There'll be some new stuff adding very quickly, but I really want to sing a couple praises to the head shed of KGRAdb, how hard they're working to get things online. There's incredibly great signs of success ahead, and it's because the audience that we have for KGRA that keeps things going, and the interactions that you have with other shows and the different hosts that are on board. And I like to also single out the head shed of KGRA, as well as Skywatcher's undying commitment to hold everything together. And as the Padre knows, this week, Skywatcher definitely was challenged with some telecommunications goodies to overcome. And he's dramatically gone over the top. And, we've talked a lot, and we talked a lot around freedom of speech and the different types, and this format of what this show presents and other shows like it, not just the paranormal, but the alternative news and the investigative and the discussion that's out there, are critical to our nation. And if not, I would say the entire globe, for people who are interested in this subject and others that you see on KGRA and stations like it. So I keep that in mind. Well, tonight, we have, I think, probably one of the most exciting things that I have seen and heard for a long time on KGRA. John Burroughs is a true friend of this particular show, true friend to everyone that you see as listed as a co-host on this show. He's really one of the most important links that we have to an actual event, as an experiencer, as a researcher, and the journey that he has taken. And he has Rendlesham Veritas Obscura Echo Protocol. And it's going to start on the 31st of this month. It's going to be, that's a Thursday. It'll air 17:30 in the Eastern time zone. It's going to go for 22 weeks. It will end around Christmas Eve. This is I'm going to let the intro speak for itself, and I want to get Padre's reaction.
nothing, just lights in the trees, a trick of the frost, a ghost on the breeze. But I saw a mirror older than me, staring through time like it wanted to speak. The forest went silent, the world held its breath. Something was watching beyond life and death. We stepped through the green, boots breaking the seal, not chasing a light, but something too real. I came back with salt on my skin, my mind split wide when the storm got in. They call it a test, but I know the deal. History blinks beneath the green veil. Yeah. Sergeant K whispered, it's not ahead, it's below. Fuse, dog tags, and timeout ought to flow. They never found what we left in that light, but it's humming in blood, and it won't come out right. They filed a report, redacted my name, buried the footage, rewrote the game, but I still hear it deep in the noise, a signal that speaks with my voice. I came back with salt on my skin, my soul unthreaded from where I had been. They say I survived, but I know I failed, left something behind in the green veil. So if you hear static out under the pine and feel like your breath ain't following time, don't look too close, don't break the seal. Some echoes are meant to stay buried in the field.
Wow. That's really well done.
And the wow is, and this is the second time I've heard it through. And there are many, in the classical literature sense, allusions in knowing John and how he writes. And I urge people to pick up his latest book that's out. It links up with many fortunate years of a friendship with him and things that he has shared over time. So I think that this is a real important and very special series that's going to come up. And we are really, and I mean this honestly, blessed that it's going to be on KGRA. And it starts this month and it runs through December. And I think it is tremendous.
Now, that's 2 weeks from tonight, right?
2 weeks from tonight.
At, you said 5:30 Mountain?
5:30 local, correct? I mean, local. Eastern time, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what's going to happen is John and I will go on at the onset of the show, the beginning of the show. We'll talk a few minutes. We're going to play the chapter, and then we'll go over what everyone just seen or heard. I have to tell you, gentlemen, I've had a lot of insight, communication with John, and I have the description of each chapter. I cannot tell you how powerful this is going to be. I told John it was profound. It's so deep, and I do not want to give anything away, but there is a reason why the last part of this, the 22nd chapter, will air on Christmas Eve. It is unbelievable, gentlemen. Unbelievable.
And I've only heard a small part of the backstory here, and I can't wait. Now, Bill, while we have you with us, if you missed the show, why would somebody see it? You know, say somebody who's like always off at work and flying and doing silly things.
Yeah, all the shows are available now. I'm just going to be really honest with this. All the paranormal shows are available on YouTube, but because of certain issues on that platform, we do not stream the law enforcement shows there because in the past that has been an issue. But still, all the programming is on KGRA Digital Broadcasting Facebook. It's all on Rumble. Just search KGRAdb. And also on X at Global Radio Live. That's for the video content. Audio, any podcasting platform that's out there, pretty much. So,
well, this one's definitely a big step into the digital realm, and I can't think of anybody better, and the experience and the kind of I'm trying to think of the right word, the culturing that John has gone through, because he's had an incredible journey all around this. And just in that little clip, just knowing some of the things that we've gone over recently in the last year with John, in the last last month that he was on with us for a couple shows and other pieces, this is going to be tremendous. And I like the fact that you're not giving anything away, and I can't wait to see the series as it goes through.
Now, this is science fiction, but obviously you can see there's a little other stuff mixed in there for a reason. But it's all that Rendlesham theme.
So I have a question. Is that John singing? Did he do that music?
No.
Oh.
He's got folks that are helping him produce this.
Okay.
This is going to be an animated series, the 22 chapters. You got a taste of it.
Yeah.
And I know everyone that's watching, those that are listening, make sure to check out the show that later on at some point. This way you can see it for yourselves. This is quite impressive. And like you said, Commander, he is just an incredible writer. And I wish I could say a spoiler, but let's just say something happened that a lot of this was drawn from in his own personal experience as this was being created.
Interesting.
But I hate to tease like that, but I don't want to get in trouble because Mr. Barrows may be watching and I'll hear it later.
Yeah, I think you are a tease.
Anyway, gentlemen, have a great rest of the show. And also, there is other stuff being on the wings here, and that's 9line.
Yeah, so everybody out there, and I love the good-natured needling that I've received in emails. Come on, Cobra, where's your show? And if you guys ever saw me when I stand up between on the break to run and get another adult beverage that I often imbue myself with during this show, you would notice that for a older man, I don't have much of a 6 left anymore because I'm working it off. And some of it very happy stuff. Now, with that little whiny excuse out of the way, the man to the left, the Skywatcher, has been an unbelievable champion of trying to get this thing done. He's done great work getting it together. I promise you that we're going to throw up some stuff on it and get back into my particular style of one-on-one. You'll have a in-depth interview with all the hosts from this show, amongst others from KGRA, and then my normal array of guests, books that I pick up, people that I meet along the way, and it's the whole enchilada that we're going to discuss as we did in the past. Obviously, most people really enjoy some of my military and military aviation jump-ins, and if I hopefully, again, without teasing, because I've held him off for so long, he may not be real interested in jumping on, but my first guest that's coming on is probably one of those most incredible people that I think done incredible work. In his insights are amazing, and I think it'll be a really fun first kickoff show. So you may see a little teaser if I can get my in proper formation this weekend, and Skywatcher gives me some more schooling on what I'm supposed to be doing. I like to walk up to the plane, do the pre-flight, get in and go. He's requiring me to do a little of the actual maintenance. And so
I will say this though, as Padre, Chris, Don, and you, obviously, you are such a busy individual traveling so many places, including across the pond and elsewhere. So we totally understand, due to your schedule, how busy you are. Your availability, and you know what, when the time is right and it's meant to happen, it will happen, but it's probably going to happen sooner rather than later.
Yes, we've got to get it done, because if we don't, in the words of Alan Shepard, light this candle. So we got to light the candle.
And I just want to say quickly, my love to Don and Vicky.
Yes.
And
Bailey. And we have
Bailey. Yes, tomorrow.
special prayers for Bailey tomorrow for quick surgery. I've had the same surgery done for a couple of my dogs, and it's serious, but they have really good outcomes, and that's their baby. So it's important to them that this one goes well.
And supposedly there's supposed to be a big announcement. We were told behind the scenes with Chris DePerno what's going at the MUFON Symposium where he's at right now. But he is on it. He better, because he said he would when he comes back to fill us in on all the juicy details about what's going on that they're going to be displaying and talking about as their main focus at this symposium. So we'll put him on the spot. The silverback will get him anyway.
We'll bat him around like a beach ball.
Yes. Anyway, gentlemen, have a great rest of your show.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Say, Commander, I had a question for you here off the top. Now, how many years have you been flying aircraft?
I'm over 45 years flying airplanes. I started flying when I was 15. I don't want to completely give away the age, but I'm well past the 60 mark.
Okay, so let me just ask you this: how many flight hours do you have?
I'm north of 15,000, which is, the last few years I haven't been flying as much as I used to in different jobs that I had. So I guess that's a fairly respectable pile of time.
And how many of the 7 continents have you flown over?
All of them.
All of, including Antarctica?
Yes.
All right. I ask you this because once again, there was a program. I just caught bits and pieces of it. Another well-known podcast, Sean Ryan, who was interviewing a supposed whistleblower about strange goings-on at the South Pole base there. And he said, and I quote, "We have technologies in Antarctica that you absolutely would not believe." Now, is he just blowing hot air and without violating any of your security protocols?
I've made 3 deployments to Antarctica, someplace between 6 to probably 8 months out of those deployments when you add them all up. Mm-hmm. I did make it down to the South Pole twice when I was there. It's not a normal thing for someone like myself flying off an icebreaker to get that. That's in my days. It was the Navy was still running it. The Air Force transition in the Navy squadron transition to a Air Force mission. Specially equipped C-130s that have a ski and wheel arrangement so they can land on the ice because there's no real hard runways to land on down there. Everything is done on ice pack, glaciers, areas like that. When I was there, I was there for the Millennium and the 3 previous years before the Millennium, there were some very funny things that happened. There was I had some really great groups of people I worked with over the years, people that were extremely funny. The nephew of Frank Capra, the famous producer, was at that point a JAG in the Navy, and he was probably one of the most talented and funny people I've ever been around. Just absolutely tremendous person. If you hear funny sounds in the background, that's one of my dogs who's digging their bed for the night on the carpet. So it'll settle out quickly. When I say I've heard all the stories, I have a very dull experience in comparison to the stories. There is a very famous Fish Boy story that we'll go over some other time. Tonight's probably not the best night to do it. What went on with that? It's a very funny story. There really wasn't any human fish amalgamations going on, but I did convince a somewhat inebriated member of my team that was happening, and there was a number of us in on the gag. Like I said, it's a good story, good sea story for another night. So I didn't see any of the things that have been talked about. I did make it all the way down to South Pole Station. It was before the South Pole Station did its rebuild. They have now built an incredibly large station down there, so big that a C-130 can pretty much taxi under the upper part of the wing of it. That's how big it is for protection. It was a major undertaking that they took. I was there when the old station was there, and the old station is partially submerged in the ice. It has like an opening, and there's the insulated housing units that are there, and then for the protection, it's actually in a cave, an ice cave that they've hollowed up. Got to go to the actual South Pole. You could actually take the pole out of the ground and hold it, and then you put it back in the ice, in the hole in the ice. And there's a ceremony at South Pole that has all the flags. So lots of interesting things happen there. Lots of stories from World War II when the Nazis were supposedly, like they did up in the north, dropping these little Nazi swastika markers with streamers they were dropping. They were claiming all this territory, belonged to it. And then, of course, all the other stories of what happened with Admiral Byrd and then Operation High Jump and the fighting with alien. Didn't see any of it. And believe me, wide open to it. Just did not have any experience at all that made me think any of that was going on.
Now, you're a spiritually sensitive man. I know that.
I would like to think so.
And was there any kind of a vibe you picked up down there that it's something that just felt off or felt weird?
I heard that, I believe it was one of the astronauts talked about it, and he and I forgot which one it was.
It was Armstrong, I think.
I don't know. I don't think it was Armstrong that made this remark, that they felt very, they had a very strong negative feeling to Antarctica. Other astronauts that have been there said that this is what they thought Mars would feel like. It's very arid, despite all the ice and blowing ice that takes the form of like a snowstorm there. It's very much desert. It's very interesting. I went to places with scientists where they were collecting meteorites that had hit the ice and they were digging them out. Went to places that probably haven't seen moisture since it separated from the large continents when they were all together. Been to areas where there was petrified wood. So it's an amazing place in those respects. I can easily see why it has the kind of attraction it does to people to talk about. This is a great location for basing. If I wanted to have somewhat of a client, that's huge. I mean, we cover such a small part of it and all the other stations that are around. And in general, most stations do not stay open over the winter period, which is our summer. They shut down, and only the biggest stations have a small manning to basically keep the place from catching on fire, to keep water going, things not to freeze. It's called the Winter Over Crew, and I have a good friend that did that, and he said that was it. He could never do it, and I think there's other people that have done it a number of times. I met people that would work in Antarctica for the season down there, which is our winter, and then they would go up and they would spend the opposite season up in Alaska, and they just worked both Arctic, both polar realms, Arctic and Antarctica. So no, I didn't see the activity there. I did not see specialized things going on. It's a very difficult environment to work at. You really have to work with people who have been there before, and that's kind of how the military does it. You're continuously training kind of the replacements. You go down the first year, you're with experienced people. You're kind of the middle management, and then you're the kind of the teacher for the next tier that's coming on, and it's 2 to 3 years, usually rotations that people work through, and then move on to other stuff. It's just really hard on the equipment. I mean, the planes stay outside. It gets so cold, or can get so cold, that there are parts in your flight manual that you read about where hydraulic fluid starts to freeze up. And when it does, it causes certain diagnostic systems that we have on there to tell you might have a foul system. So you learn those kind of things. And quite honestly, with the exception of how the LC-130s are built, the vast majority of aircraft that operate down there aren't like specially designed. We don't have special heaters and stuff like that on there. You just learn how you have to keep the aircraft working and how long it takes to warm it up and make sure that you don't break anything by allowing it to warm up. One of the ways I was able to work my APDETs is we could fly the helicopter solo down there. So I basically had people work 4 6-hour shifts. And since it's 24-hour daylight and everything is open almost all the time, we kind of worked around the clock. And that way our 2 helicopters were constantly in use. So they never got super cool unless we got into a really bad storm. And then we cover them up as best we could. Then you go out and you dig all the snow and ice off of it, and then slowly start warming it up and getting it to go and get it warmed up and go back to business.
And from that impressive documentary a few years back, The Day After Tomorrow, we all learned what happens when a flash freeze comes to a helicopter and how everything can just freeze, including the crew.
Yeah, I never experienced the kind of flash freeze that was portrayed in that. I can imagine that. Now, I have been able to see both experiences were pretty interesting. One of the scientists that I was with did the old water where you take the water and you throw it up in the air and it turns to ice, or in some cases it was so cold. And when I was in Dead Horse, Alaska, it sublimated before it actually hit the ground. It makes a popping sound and it goes almost into a near gaseous state, and only very little of it freezes and it disappears. And
I've done that in South Dakota, by the way.
Yes, there's a special treat. And in the desert a couple of times, same thing with water, and it would nearly almost all of it would evaporate before it would hit the ground if you threw it up in the air, and it would go into the gaseous state almost immediately, the other end of the experience.
Wow.
And both of them are the heat transfer is what's happening. It's so different in the heat transfer. That's what causes that.
So with 15,000 hours logged on all 7 continents, and I'm going to say probably all of the major oceans as well, have you ever encountered a UAP in flight?
In flight, yes, without being too cute, yes, I did. But I found out it was something that we were flying.
Okay.
And I couldn't find out exactly what it was. I think I've been able to deduce since then. It was when I was doing instructor duty with the Navy, and we were up against some of the ranges down by Eglin Air Force Base. I was working for the Navy out of the Pensacola area. And, you take the student, and there's a certain part of night flying, and we had a couple places that we went that were exceptional that the Air Force ran that were very good fields to go, not a lot of traffic, and then we could hit like the civilian field. Because generally when you have flight students, you're trying to get them experience in different types of runways, different types of lighting and those kind of things. And when I was out flying that night, and the student was doing pretty good, and you're never supposed to take your eyes, I think my attention was wandering. And that's when I saw lights and activities going on that caught my attention, and the types of flying and the movement that was going on. And we had put a piece of gear on the trainers that allowed us to see all the traffic activity that was around us. So if you looked at the gauge, if you looked at the screen, it was very big, you could look and then you could figure out where it was. And there was symbology that would tell you if it was above or below you. And if it became a threat, then it would change how the format was to get you more concerned about avoiding a collision. It's a good piece of gear. That was showing that something was there, and then it was not there, like there was something going on with how it, like we spoke a couple weeks ago. When the B-2s left and the transponders were on, they made it crystal clear that there were B-2s, these airplanes leaving Whiteman and going west. As the deception part of it, that's pretty uncommon for those airplanes. It's not uncommon when you're in a restricted airspace of a military and you are doing something that's stealthy. If you're doing something that is, you're testing something on the ground, you don't want to give, when you're doing the test, you don't want to give an advantage by using or allowing the air traffic control system to give it away. And that is made it to a system called indicator friend of foe on the airplane. And what that's for is that when you're in a combat situation, you put discrete coding in that. And when it's interrogated by different systems in the air or on the ground, fighters, AWACS, ground radars, it will then assure or very closely assure to people on the ground, friendly or bad guy. And obviously, planes crash, that gear can be recovered. So the way that you code that up and how it goes in is very difficult to easily get those codings. So what I suspect was probably happening was this aircraft may have been turning on and off its system just to orient it so that people on the ground know where it is, and then it's disappearing, and then they're trying to figure out where it went. Not an uncommon practice. I've done it myself, and a lot less anything, sexy like I'm talking about aircraft doing that as part of a test, because I have gear on board that people are checking in my very simple twin engine airplane that does the job really, really well. So we saw this, we talked about it, and then I started poking around to find out a little bit more. And then it was actually a couple years later that I was able to talk to somebody who knew what I was talking about, knew my background. I was still on active duty, and kind of clued me in where it was, what it was, without saying what it was. And we agreed that we needed to drop the matter at that time. The other one, I did not see it flying, the way you put the criteria. And it was one of my road trips coming back. I was coming up, and I am just in the edge of the Hudson Valley, which is the great hotspot for Bill and I and Chris out this way. There's been numerous activities that have gone on. I was very close to the Bridgewater Triangle area as well. That is its own interesting space of cryptids and all kinds of paranormal activity. In traffic, very, very poor weather, and I've slowed down the traffic headed, and I see an aircraft light, and the aircraft light is appearing to come to me like it is an aircraft that's approaching. As you know, when you look at the parallax, if you go with it, it looks like it's going very, very fast if you're both going the same direction. When you're closing in on each other, it tends to have a stationary feel to it on that. So I've spent a lot of time, looking at aircraft and judging that kind of stuff. So I'm watching it. It was obvious it wasn't a planet, it wasn't a satellite the way it was. And then all of a sudden, it did the classical, hard, almost 90-degree move like you see in the special effects and disappeared. And it disappeared, when I say that, didn't blink out. It went away at very, very fast speed. And I'm not sure if I'm filling it in a little bit better, but it almost looked like I could see the air disturbance from the area when it did this rapid acceleration, this turn. So if it was stationary, or if it was very slowly moving and it did this rapid acceleration and turn out, caught my attention. I have no idea what that was. And where it was, as I described geographically, is an active area. And even that John Billings, the famous World War II pilot I talked about, he encountered something not very far in the 60s, 50s or 60s, when he was flying as an airline pilot for Eastern Airlines. He spotted something. He talked to air traffic control, and air traffic control told him, "Yep, we have it. Don't worry about it. It's gonna be nowhere near you." And he saw it and go by, and it was a very high speed. And I'm sure it was probably one of the early high-speed reconnaissance airplanes that were tested. Remember, Long Island had Grumman out there in those days. They built the F-14 out there. There's a lot of areas. Glenn, I can't think of the other company now. It's the names that came to me, but it was in upstate New York. So there was a fair amount of activity up until probably the late 80s, early 90s, and it started to dwindle out of here. But we see all the time up this way where I live in New England, countless reports of black triangles. I am sure, and one of my good friends, Ross, who's back in England, and hopefully he's catching the show, we came up with a pretty good theory. Ross had done some pretty interesting investigation from airfields that were supposedly closed on the northern part of Britain and Scotland that miraculously stayed very well maintained. And it was probably B-2s or B-2 type airplanes, my obsession with the flying triangle. But countless reports occur during the summer months when you have young kids out, because out in summertime, and you're looking up at the sky, and they talk about how the stars are being blocked out in the shape of a triangle. and countless reports are filed up this way to MUFON and others. So I'm sure we're on a trajectory or a flight path, what they call the Great Circle Route, that if you're making trips over to that part of Europe, you're hitting tankers and doing that, it's a very common flight path that would be taken. So that's a very long-winded answer to a very simple question. I apologize.
No, it's always enjoyable to hear you fill us in on the finer points of aviation technology. But this is a good time, I think, to segue into this, some of the news that broke in the last 2 weeks. We really haven't gotten a chance to dive into it here on UAP Crossfire. Ross Coulter made two statements in a recent episode of his podcast. One is that he is certain and has heard from very reliable sources that the Tic-Tac incident, the one that really broke the whole field wide open, it came out in the New York Times in 2017, I think it was, that is Lockheed Martin technology. Now, I know, Commander, that, again, you cannot break any security protocols. But if that is our technology, it would almost certainly have to be unmanned, wouldn't it?
I don't agree with that.
You
and
don't?
the reason that I don't is because I don't think it's flying under the rules that we're flying the vast majority of our aircraft now. And what I mean by that is that does not exhibit what I would call standard aerodynamic lifting and air manipulation, air molecule manipulation. Curved surfaces producing thrust, deflecting that thrust, causing to have higher pressure on the bottom of an airfoil to create the lower pressure on top so that you have lift. And when you have lift, then you vector that lift around and you're able to do all these maneuvers and then do all the other exotic stuff, depending on the type of aircraft. Bending the thrust around, using different types of airfoils to get different types of reactions, and then all the things that go on. And the reason I say that is because everything that I've seen about that, the infamous or famous, I like famous better, Tic-Tac, is that it appears that it is using a non-gravitational or anti-gravity type system. Now, I might be wrong on that. We've talked a lot about the plasma business, and a couple reasons I say that, and then I'll get to why I think it's occupied.
Okay. Is this what they call a gravitic drive?
Well, it could be. Gravitic is kind of like a new word that's been put into the recent lexicon for the anti-gravity, and it may indicate. We've had some pretty famous patents that have been filed. One of them is a famous Navy scientist who threw some in there just to to claim the turf where they're going with this. We've had stories and rumors about this since the Operation Paperclip and what the Nazis were experimenting with. One shred of truth that seems to run through all of this is very exotic to the way that we're doing business now. And I think this is what accounts for the fact that we do not see a lot of this. I think that whole event that was going on was kind of staged, not just for our purposes to evaluate it, but I think it was staged as an announcement to other world powers. And I can go further down the line. I think that's partially why the recent strikes in Iran went the way they did, to show that kind of precision and kind of absolute domination that the particular aircraft that they used, the B-2, provided. And that's very old technology. That's technology that was conceived and put together in the 70s, actually constructed in the 80s, and is still successfully flying. And I think the next iteration coming out is going to be even more impressive in what it can do. So with all that said, it's not a conventional system. I think it's using a high energy field of some kind, a plasma generating field of some kind around it. It's maneuvering. And I think when you're doing stuff like that, I think it means on the inside, you're able to create the kind of environment that you want in the inside. Meaning, if you are working against G, I think you're able to make a cockpit or an occupant station to be able to safely manipulate the controls. It doesn't mean you're not feeling G-forces. I'm just saying that when you saw those incredible maneuvers, the type of G-loading that was going on, I don't think the occupants were experiencing or feeling it that way. Couple reasons why I think this. And I know everyone's AI and everything is unmanned and all that. And you know that I wave the bullshit flag quite often with this because it's. I'm not saying it's not probable. I'm not saying that unmanned systems don't have their place. We have 2 or 3 unmanned systems that are out there right now that to get the information right now today, to get the information for this particular aircraft, they put a cockpit in it because it was so much easier to put a pilot in it to fly it and evaluate the aerodynamics of these airplanes that are out there flying. That's not uncommon, that they put the human occupant in it because the human occupant can react, can do it, and you are able to not spend months upon months of programming and coding to get it and then go into your test. So you can actually evaluate the aerodynamic structure, the type of airfoils, the power that you're putting on that, and then you remove the cockpit out. And as you heard me say, if we're building airplanes now and you're not making them optionally piloted, you're wasting your time. If you're not making airplanes optionally piloted, you are wasting your time, especially for military aircraft. If I never have to get on an airliner again, I'll be happy. Believe me, especially after last week's travel. It was terrible. But my point is, if you have the ability to have optionally piloted vehicles, and now you have an emergency, and you need to move aircraft, you can move those aircraft without crews on them and get to the place where you need them and put the crews on them. So the replacement airplane could fly in without it. If you have a situation like another Chernobyl, God forbid, or something like that, where putting people inside the airplane is going to mean you're limited to how long the plane can stay there because of radiation or chemical or biological levels. Mm-hmm. This is an option that now you don't have to, put people in danger like that. So there's important reasons not to do that. But back to the Tic-Tac. A couple of things that I've seen about this and the somewhat cursory study that I've done. It would seem to me, on a good day, even today with all the networking we have, it's still a very, very delicate part of the system, how you communicate back and forth. So if the Tic-Tac was flying unmanned, then it sounds like to me that you might have to have a total autonomous capability. And the way this was flying doesn't really match what I think we have available for total autonomy, the way it reacted to other airplanes being around it. Mm-hmm. What I'm getting at is, what I suspect is how this thing is propelled and how it's operating and how it's displacing itself in 3-4 dimensions, height, speed, position, as well as time. Time as we are talking in this time, not all the other multiple levels that we sometimes get into. I don't think you're going to be able to easily have radio signals that will penetrate through it. So so if you have someone on the ground controlling, which we've done a lot of tests where we've done that, I don't see how you get that data link to work. And where this all happened is pretty impressive, because if they used a satellite array, and we do that, to control some unmanned systems or to communicate with manned aircraft, it would have been a pretty big tell. And never has anybody on the other parts of the press talked about during the Tic-Tac that this was discovered. And that's pretty rare that years later leaks don't come out and describe how it was tracked. We talk about tracking stuff all the time. Steve Douglas, when I was on the show with us, how he does it just with radio calls, how he's worked the networks and been able to come up with stuff. The other part is some of the optical kind of things that are going on with it. There's very strange heat anomalies, how you never really get a clear picture. Now, to be fair, those could have been dumbed up pictures, but I've never heard anyone say that what they were experiencing with the very classic Tic-Tac was something different than what was shown on those heads-up displays, those video copies. Now, the eyeballs, they talked about what they saw, and that's where they got the description of the Tic-Tac. They talked about the disturbance around the water, going in and out of the water, all those kinds of things going on. And that's the other one I find pretty interesting. To have a vehicle go into salt water, which is basically acid for anything that has a metallic structure, because that's all you do on airplanes and ships at sea is chase rust.
Yep.
I mean, the corrosion is incredible. It to me seems to be a technology that is probably cost prohibitive, and as I've said in the past, I'm convinced it's probably very destabilizing. So if you can show to the world that you have this capability, it's in limited numbers, it's not a threat, it's a kind of a thing that pushes it back. And quite honestly, I think part of all this is that we don't want to upset the apple cart too quickly, too fast. I think we have alternate energy sources out there, but we're going to use up most of the oil before we get to those. And we got to figure out how we're going to transition economies. And the same thing with military stability. I think that this is part of what's going on.
You're our resident expert on this, and
that's a word I'm not comfortable with, but
you know more than I do. Okay, so let's take this and see if we can put this to bed. I have heard other commentators say that there is no way that this could be a blue-on-blue exercise without informing them. That one military agency testing something would absolutely inform the other. And I have tried to tell them, but again, I don't have the gravitas you do, that they do it all the time.
Correct.
And now let me bounce this scenario. Would it be possible that a well-known, powerful defense contractor might attempt to test objects in a military scenario and then come back after the fact and show it to the admirals and the generals and say, guys, look what we got? What do you think?
I'm going to say no to the second part, yes to the first part. No to the second part. We'll do that one first, because if you did not have those activities were authorized, no doubt about that. How far down that line goes? When you do certain types of readiness exercises, all you know is the exercise is going to start at a certain time, and everybody kind of builds up for that and gets ready for it. I worked as part of a unit, and the unit would say, the exercise starts at midnight on what night? And in the beginning, because it was all good-natured and stuff, most people agreed that would be like first light, maybe as the sun's just starting to, dawn's just starting to break. That's when things would start and all hell would break loose. Not one of the guys that I worked for. If it was at midnight, we were flying and we were in the air at about 10 minutes before midnight. And when the midnight struck, we were crossing the line and we were flying into a base, and guys were fast roping out of helicopters, and they're rolling up people left and right, zip tying them, putting them in, into holds, throwing them into the helicopter. We're flying them out, capturing people. Lots of units do that. And then there are what I consider grievous departures that have happened in the past, where we did things, experiments with LSD, chemical, biological agents. There is a lot of things that have gone on in and out of the military under government auspices that have occurred for whatever reason that someone justified in their mind that it wasn't the right thing to do. But in this particular case, this carrier was on its workups. They were getting ready to go on a deployment. So it's a really good candidate for it. No one was armed, so there wasn't going to be any accidental missile firing. And the other part is this. Even though they're not armed, the aircraft, the ships are. And at some point, if this was, and like we had on the other UAS events that occurred later, where they had all the little UASs, the little drones that flew over, and the Navy sailors had their phones out, and they had actually made some videos of this, and it got onto the internet. And the fact that didn't go out of control, and that that was even allowed, that the phones were allowed, that stuff got out as easily as it did. This was an assessment as part of everything else. And Rick in the chat is saying, well, come on, Cobra, there's a long distance of time between it. We've been going butt to butt or head to head, butting heads. That's probably what I was trying to say.
Do that, yes.
With the People's Republic of China for a long time, since the 50s, if you want to get pretty accurate. So I don't think that this is anything new, and I don't think that they are solely the reasons that they the only candidates out there to put that into check. And I do remember this. My formative years, I was in Europe in the mid to late 80s, and I was at a advanced tactical school, flying school, and we got a brief, and they were, the Americans were coming in and saying, listen, it's great the way we've been doing business. And almost all of NATO was designed to do very fast jets, very, very low. Myself and the helicopters, we were planning on never being above 100, 150 feet above the surface of the earth when we got going on ops. Because at 200 feet to that 150 feet, we expected jets to be going over the top of us. And then exercises, they had a thing called thumping. They would actually bring the jet up over the top of the rotors, and it was pretty impressive when they laid down the disturbed air coming off their wings. Especially if they did any kind of a pull up, it really made it pretty dramatic. My point is, that's how we were doing it. The Tornado was designed to be a near supersonic to just below supersonic, transonic, just out of afterburner fighter bomber. And that was how we were going to get through the integrated air defenses that the then Soviets, now Russians, had produced. And, it had been seen in Vietnam, and we had costly losses because we were flying much more of a World War II Korean kind of approach in the beginning of it. We created some new tactics and new ways of doing it. The Wild Weasel were the pairing of aircraft that would get the missile to turn on, and another one would drop the bomb or shoot the missile to disable the radars to keep the surface-to-air missiles down. So a lot of intense, a lot of accidents. We lost a lot of people because we were flying at those speeds and stuff. And we have this, this thing coming out in the classified channels, not classified anymore. Get ready. We're going to be going in around 5,000 to 10,000 feet. Everyone's looking around.
Okay, well, since you brought the Chinese into this, let's introduce the second of Coulthard's statements. He says he has it also in good authority that the initial part of the New Jersey drone flap was Chinese tech, and it was those were Chinese drones. Now, I have a challenge to that, and it's simply this. If China had something so advanced, it would have to have been sea-launched or launched by operatives in the U.S. And these drones were doing incredible maneuvers and silent in some cases, just really weird stuff. What is the pro and con balance there if one of those with their latest tech were to be brought down and we would then have it? I think that to risk it over sensitive U.S. areas like those drones were, it's too big a risk. What do you think?
I agree that the risk is pretty high. I have a lot of trouble with that particular theory, partially for what you're saying, although what we just saw happen in Iran and the Israelis through their special operators setting up and literally assembling their drones inside Iran and working in Iran and sending them and, doing kinetic operations with them, taking people out, identifying targets, pretty impressive. Although Iran is a lot different, I think you can set that up in like the Southwest United States where there's a lot more wide open spaces. This particular stretch of airspace on there, we talked about it at the time. I think because of the atmosphere going into the election, I think because of all the things that were going on, there were different parts of the government, different parts of the swamp, whatever we want to call that were looking for diversions and things going on there. Obviously, a lot of other people joined in with it, but that really looks like an evaluation of using unmanned aircraft in airspace, putting them into fairly congested airspace so that airliners and people like me that are flying general aviation airplanes, and everybody else is, news helicopters and private stuff can all operate together, because it really, that's a big desire. Get it off the surface roads, move it quicker. And there are some applications like medical applications where this could be the cutting edge stuff, where you have one location that's producing what you need, and then you fly it right to the hospital. I think the whole thing of Amazon delivering it to your house is kind of cute, and I could be wrong. It's probably going to come. I have a hard time quite seeing that all work out, but it could. So I think there's a lot of other things in play there. But I have to say this, and I don't really want to upset folks, but I think the previous administration was a lot more comfortable with the PRC activities and things that went on. It just from where I sit in the cheap seats, that if something was going on and they weren't going to do it, and to wit, I'm talking about the balloon, okay? We tracked this balloon, and then I got to hear this kinds of nonsense that we can't shoot it down over Canada, we can't shoot it down over Montana, and it's got to fly all over the United States, and then we take it down at sea because we don't want to risk it. I understand I don't want to risk it when it gets to the East Coast. And then after that, we couldn't shoot them down enough. We were shooting little balloons with F-16s in Lake Michigan with the missile pointed at Canada. But you're telling me over the great Northwest, the Great Plains states, big sky country, we can't take a shot at this spy balloon. So I see some inconsistency on how we dealt with them in the previous world that we lived in last year and the years before, the last 4 years, to where we are now. But I think my heart of hearts tells me that was a sanctioned operation. They were trying to determine it, and I'm always going to go back to this, and I know we're coming up against the break. I think a lot of times when the government does these things, they're looking for our reaction to it. They're looking to see what people talk about it, and most importantly, when is it no longer part of the news cycle? When do we move on to something else? When do we get upset about something new? It used to be weeks that people talked about stuff. Now you're lucky if it goes 6 hours and move on to the next subject.
Well, speaking of hours, our first one is done. And so we're going to take a quick break here, and we'll be back in about 3 minutes with more of tonight's UAP Crossfire. So please stay with us. Welcome back to UAP Crossfire. Dan, Padre, Carlson here, and Commander Cobra holding down the fort tonight. Chris DePerno is on assignment at MUFON, and Don Ecker is actually with us in chat. Don, we're praying for you, and we hope that you feel better soon. Before the break, we were talking about shooting down party balloons with Sidewinder missiles, something that I think everyone should do at least once in their life for entertainment. But one of the questions I've always had, Commander, and this goes back to my interest in World War II aviation, which you can probably see over my shoulder, is a hobby that I have. When an aircraft uses an aerial cannon, and I think we have the 20 millimeter air-to-air cannons in our fighters these days, and that bullet or that shell gets out there, it's got to come down somewhere, right? Sure. I mean, so is part of the concern that if they use the less expensive cannon option, that those falling shells could spray a farmyard or farmhouse or something like that? Yeah,
I don't think anybody cares at that point. Okay. The major reason, there's two major reasons that if you choose to use a cannon. Cannons, because of the actual mass size, they can be slow, but their mass, when they hit, especially during the era that you're referring to, the damage was devastating. They tended to fire at a lower, slower rate, but when they connected in a big way. Yeah. So the number two reason that cannons can be a real issue is the weight. So they're heavy guns. The barrel is heavy. The rounds are heavy. The casing that you're talking about. In the case of the A-10, when I was a young lad, they used to talk about, the A-10 was designed to be up over the top of our troops, vehicles, trench lines, in the Fulda Gap, as the story went, and then would pop up because we had to fly low altitude, dive down, take that magnificent GAU 8, which is probably one of the most incredible aerial cannons that's ever been put on an aircraft. Basically, they built the plane around the cannon. And it would shoot at the tanks and then dive and go down. And the story that they used to tell us young cadets was, well, we can't have those shell casings falling out of the airplane, because if they land and they hit the vehicles and our troops, you could kill people. It's a nice story, but that's not the reason that they did it. In the A-10, they retained the shell casing because they needed to maintain the center of gravity of the airplane. So as they went through in this beltless, they weren't linked. It was a belt that they flowed through to shoot out and a prodigious rate of fire that you could get out of that weapon. The casing just would go back into the retainer, and the tank, not the tank like a armored vehicle, the physical enclosure where these rounds were going and where the empty shells would go when they were done, was huge. And it was designed to keep the aircraft within a CG balance. And the A-10 is probably one of the most survivable airplanes. I urge anyone that's listening to the show tonight to go on YouTube and take a look at, most of the wing missing. But the concept of its design was one wing missing, one engine not working, and part of the tail, and it still would fly back. And there are some pretty impressive from the OIF and OEF events and Desert Storm that are amazing with the punishment that the aircraft took. So that's the story on cannons as I understand it. And in general, I don't think anybody cares. In fact, during World War I, the flechette was a very interesting weapon that they used to use on trenches. They would actually sometimes either create it behind the cockpit or put it in the back cockpit, and they would make steel darts, basically is what they were. They would be in a hopper, and the pilot would line up on the trench and open the hopper as he flew down the line. They'd fly at sufficient altitude, and they would get down, and they were lethal. They were lethal gravity falling darts that would do grievous damage. And and the other part is it would get people out of the trenches, and then they would open up and start shooting when people came out of the trenches.
I didn't know that. I learned so much when I talk to you. It's incredible. But as long as we're talking about shooting down drones, I don't know if you know who the commentator Eric Erickson is, but he broke news today that he has sources ostensibly in the military that have informed him that the same technology that was employed by the drones over New Jersey is now being used by the Russians against the Ukrainians. And he broke that story about 5 hours ago.
Right.
And so we know that Russia is using drones. And, we've already discussed tonight the manned versus unmanned aircraft. But, if you're talking about something that's going to go and blow itself up, tying that into the whole UAP thing, if we're in a situation where we have to bring something down, what are the protocols for that? Who actually makes that decision, and what's kind of the flow of shoot or don't shoot in the military?
If you're talking from an air defense standpoint, where something's approaching the outside the United States and it's coming towards our airspace, our declared boundaries and secure airspace, we have fighters. We have now we're deploying more Patriot type missile systems, and it's a fairly clear line of demarcation what they're going to do. With the idea, of course, being you want to engage that as early as you possibly can, so that when you do detonate and you do go forward with it, the earlier part that you were discussing, wreckage. Ammunition that misses, stuff that goes up and comes back down. There's been countless examples in the end of the last century, places like Libya, where they had no chance of shooting the attacking aircraft on the airstrike, but they were shooting everything up, and they were shooting it almost straight up. And it wasn't like self-destructing, it wasn't exploding. And even when I did, the materials were coming down, and it's covering large areas, and you're inflicting damage and you're killing people. There's just no way around it. Again, back to that earlier discussion, I think that partially could have been an assessment of what's going to go on. The Russian-Ukraine war has been an incredible laboratory, and you can see that the Israelis very rapidly have used some recent lessons learned to very quickly apply that in Iran. I think it is honest to say that we probably have some measures, but they're very brutish measures. I just read something today in Task and Purpose, great online military journal, where they're going back to the old days with the tanks, and the tanks are going to fire rounds that are going to air explode very close to where they are. They're going to take it down, and that's just an extension of how they had a Sabo round that they used to talk to us about in Germany, that when they saw helicopters, that's what the tanks were going to do. They weren't going to wait around. They were just going to go, and they were going to blow as much as the area around it, trees, air, and go and clear a large part of the airspace out with a detonating Sabo round to go do that. We're doing similar things. You've seen a lot of recent technology. The thing that's difficult in the world of quote unquote drones, or the UAS, the unmanned aerial systems, it's a wide spectrum of capabilities. The ones that we saw doing the New Jersey op were fairly sophisticated, though they were flying kind of set paths in there. They had large cargoes, and of course the overall, I don't want to say hysteria, that's not the right word, but the whole thing going on with it just built upon it. Silence. You had people taking pictures saying they're silent. Well, they were too far away to hear any kind of sound that was coming out. And there are some that are very quiet, especially in an urban area when you have vehicle traffic, industrial noise in the background. It can mask it very quickly. So those may have a network where you're trying to take the network. So you point it at the vehicle, and now you're trying to overwhelm it with some kind of EMI, electromagnetic interference, to try to break its lock. And then you are counting on one or two things, that it has some kind of self-programmed logic that when it loses it, it's going to go into an orbit in that spot till it regains it, or it goes back to its origin. Then you have the kinetics, where you're going to shoot stuff up and try to take it down. Today I read that they are getting better gun sights, so soldiers will be able to aim whatever their long gun is, whatever their long rifle is, and have a better shot at taking them down. And then you have the smaller ones, which are basically the personal hobbyist drone that's out there, with very small payloads, but can go. I mean, it was incredible what the Ukrainians were doing. They were flying them into areas. Now, pretty gutsy what they're doing, because they had to get pretty close. The range of these things is not that great. But it does allow a very small team, especially if you're patient, to get in, study your target, and you realize, well, it's got a nice clamshell on it, but there's no nets, there's nothing in it, and we just got to fly down. And then they would fly into these repair centers, the hatch is open, and drop the thing down in the hatch.
Yeah.
Or look around, and when you saw the gasoline or the diesel fuel or something that was explosive, hit that so that you get the secondary order explosions go forward with it. So it's not new. What they're doing is not new. The method, the delivery method, is a new method that's going with it, and it will be contended with. So what you're driving at is what you're going to do in an urban area is very similar to the kind of discussions that they had during 9/11, where you had pilots that had to make decisions about taking down airliners because they did not know what was what. They didn't know what they had. And you had pilots ranging. Remember, the vast majority took off were not armed. They were not capable. So now they're talking about, well, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to ram it. And what we'll do is we'll drive the aircraft in as close as we can, eject. And they're talking about ejecting very close to make sure that the ejection doesn't cause the plane to miss and take it out. And others were talking about just doing the ram to ensure that it was going to happen. So those kinds of horrible decisions are being made now. Well, is that ever going to come out? No. You could never tell the public what's going on with that. And those are I consider some of the most horrible things you have to deal with when you talk about that. So if the impetus is to avoid that, you got to figure out how you're going to take them out more quickly. I can tell you this. After 9/11, I was assigned to the District of Columbia. I was working out of there, and we had these kinds of talks. And I got to have some interesting talks. I got to be on these table discussions and exercises. They would say, okay, my call sign, kind of like Cobra. Hey, give us your horror story. Okay, here's my horror story. 6 pickup trucks, 12 guys. They're carrying a suicide vest, and they're going to use paragliders. They get around the Beltway. They start driving down the Beltway. They stand up. They inflate their parachute. They turn their little motors on. And I was watching these people that were using these little man-packed paragliders. Mm-hmm. They're amazing.
Yeah.
And the best part, or the worst part, depending on how you look at it, is you get them into an area, you can disable them, you can kill the person. Mm-hmm. They still have the explosives on them.
Yep. Maybe even on a dead man switch, you know.
Correct. So but even if you don't, can you imagine what that? Remember, it doesn't have to always be an effective where you take the building down. If you can cause the mass concern, if you can cause that, you can sway the public very quickly. That we don't know what we're doing. How come we're not prepared for this? You know, sue for peace. All these things that are going on, or it can just go into mass bedlam. I look at the times that we're living in now, and I am very concerned that a combination of those kinds of things, and then what we have talked about, and it to me seems to be something that we should be actively thinking is a possibility of a number of people within the confines of our borders right now that may not be here for the best reasons and are looking for those opportunities to go forward and take advantage of any kind of major activity like that goes on. It's again, we had war plans for the battle in Europe like that. We had people that were behind the lines or ready to go behind the lines, so that second order of the battle movement, the second order of echelon that was going to move towards Western Europe, was going to be stopped by those people that were on the other side of it. Obviously, again, that's not hard to envision or understand how that was going to go. Now, I think the other piece to all this that we're up against is the timing cycle, or the amount of time to analyze it, is greatly reduced. But we have a higher amount of facts. We have this thing with AI now that we're depending on to help give us a rapid analysis to make the decision. And I think that is going to be a very steep learning curve in the God forbid scenarios that could come up out of it.
I guess my question was more along the lines, and excellent material. Thank you very much for that. A pair of fighters is scrambled to investigate a UAP, a sensitive airspace. Let's use Washington, D.C. There's a UAP that is, not responding to hails or whatever. A couple of, I don't know, what would they use? F-16s, F-15s go up and they cite it. It's on their radar. It's not something they know. Who clears the shoot down, or is that something that's left to the pilot and his initiative or her initiative?
It could be a combination of that. There could be standing orders that are in that. In the case of something that is known, the small single engine airplane, right? We've heard a lot of it. The airliner, the intermediate business jet kind of thing. They're going to do a lot to try to avoid having that actual kinetic engagement with it. And then if it's slow enough and it's slower than the jets, there's helicopters, Coast Guard helicopter, in fact, that's assigned to do the visual fly up. So when you're between those speed gates, the helicopter's fast enough to get up with most small general aviation airplanes, and then you have the jet. And the jet has things they can do. They do the thump. They'll come across the front of the nose of that and go forward. And in general, we've been fortunate that most of those people realize, I flew into a place that I'm not supposed to fly, and start to comply with it, and their life is going to get turned upside down when they go. There's also surface-to-air capabilities in the DC area to protect that. And there's a protocol, and there's people that are constantly watching it, and it's going to go, and then someone's going to have to make a decision. And I can guarantee whoever makes that decision is going to be praised and ridiculed no matter.
Yeah, it's a no-win.
It is a no-win. It is a no-win. So you're trying to avoid that as much as possible to have that come up. Now, let's say you roll up on something and it's the Tic-Tac situation.
Yeah.
It's the we don't know what it is situation.
Exactly.
Well, for years it's been rumored, and for a long time there were protocols that were in the non-classified sense that talked about what you would do if you encountered an extraterrestrial, and it kind of disappeared. It went away. It wasn't kept in the documents anymore. Anybody who's listening can do a quick internet search, and I'm sure they'll find some of the things or excerpts that were put into manuals on that. Again, I think that there is a very well delineated protocol. I've never been in an area where I was exposed to what that is. Mm-hmm. I can only hazard guesses on how that goes.
I would have to believe that if you have, let's say it's a Tic-Tac or the flying egg, it's not responding to hails. It's not obeying commands to land or move away. There's a point on a map where if it penetrates that perimeter, you got to take it down because you just don't know.
Right. I think that that's a fairly accurate way to go. I mean, in the past, when aircraft have done that, the very famous one is the Army helicopter pilot that no longer was in the Army, and he stole a helicopter. He just lifted it, and he flew it to the White House. And if you remember what happened, they moved the president, to the secure areas below the White House. Mm-hmm. And in those days, they didn't have anything except long guns and shotguns and handguns, and everybody was out all over that building, and they completely ventilated that helicopter. He did an auto-rotative landing to the grass. He survived. I don't even think he was badly injured in any way, and he went to prison. And he was there because he was protesting on, how things had gone for Vietnam vets. I think that was the case of the situation. My point is, the whole reason that happened is because we didn't lock helicopters.
Yeah.
After that, helicopters had to have a chain and padlock put in. Most military airplanes don't have keys to start the airplane. It doesn't make sense to have keys to start an airplane. You have, a procedure, and you have basically push buttons and switches that you throw, and off you go. Some require external coordination with someone outside the airplane to get air moving through the engine to get started so it can do the start, and others just start off a battery and have their own self-start capability. But that was one of the changes. So that's why when you see people, they talk about security around the fields, they got a lot better. The installation has to step up, and I can tell you right now, working at a base now, it's a daily reminder. There's as soon as you drive up, there's a color code to tell us what the threat condition is, and there are great people that are working the gates, great people that are patrolling and running the op. And I'm not at a very sensitive installation of any kind. It's serious where I'm at, so you can imagine others. That's just the price of doing business. Now, I'm going to switch tables on you, Dan, and for the audience, because I want to talk about this with you. I've been talking to you about this a little bit, and I'm going to talk, and if anybody who's listening is interested, drop me the email, and I'll send you a copy of this. And it's entitled The 10 Most Famous UFO Sightings Throughout History. You want to hazard a guess what number one is? It's come up.
Roswell.
Roswell, yeah. Roswell is the first one they have here. They got one of the famous photographs. I got to be honest with you. I have vacillated back and forth between extraterrestrial and not. But I will let me just clarify my position on Roswell. Obviously, something happened. There was obvious mistakes or intentional deception that went on around the incident. It's indisputable that something occurred. It seems indisputable to me that something was recovered. But I have heard explanations throughout the whole thing that tell me one day I'm convinced it was extraterrestrial, and other days I'm convinced it wasn't. And part of it is the amount of information that's out there, and a long span from the time that it occurred to then when people remembered stuff, and then people started to come forward with stuff. and witnesses started to show up on it. So there's that aspect. There was a balloon program going on that was extremely sensitive. And that balloon program used a balloon that went up to high altitude. It got into a saucer shape, and it was doing what the Chinese balloon did. It got into the airways, and its whole job was to do radiation level checks, because we want to know what the then Soviets were doing, as well as what the People's Republic of China was doing. We were looking for the types of detonations and the background radiation that they could scoop up. And the reason they were using the balloons is because the U-2 wasn't quite online yet. The B-57, the RB-57, which preceded and then was part of the U-2 program, wasn't quite online yet, because we had just started to get them. So this late 40s to early 50s, mid 50s, this was a critically important program. And it was very, very sensitive, because I believe the government did not want to let on that we had this ability going on. And at that point, the radar obviously could not pick these up. We did not have radar sensitive enough to do this. I don't know if other nations were doing it, but that was a big part of it. And that all surrounds Roswell. So I think I throw it to you. What's your thoughts on Roswell?
Like you, I go back and forth. Yeah, clearly something happened. I don't think that's in dispute. Something that involved a highly sensitive, as you say, or top secret military project, or I don't know about extraterrestrial, but let's just say something from a neighborhood not around here. And I really struggle with the early newspaper reports of Air Force downing a flying saucer and the recovery of bodies. I don't buy the whole recovery of crash test dummies that were thrown out of a balloon or something.
Yep.
But I think that it seems that more and more information seems to be coming out. There's newer books. There's people who have died and their deathbed confessions. And my experience as a pastor, people don't tend to lie when they're about to meet their maker. And they swear that this was something otherworldly. For their understanding, that's, I think, what they were saying. Interdimensional, maybe something we don't know about that's been here all along, but just not, let's just say, not human in construct or origin. And so, like you, I go back and forth, and it just kind of depends upon what the evidence supports at the time. And at the moment, right here, I'm thinking, there's something there that is otherworldly. Let's put it that way.
All right. You want to take a guess at number 2? You kind of linked it up.
Oh, Roswell. I was going to say Rendlesham is pretty widely known.
Yeah. Number 2, according to this list, is the Kenneth Arnold sighting and the flying saucer.
Oh, yeah.
And, one of the things that I found, and I heard it, I don't want to say I was dismissive of it. I don't think I gave it much credence. But Don, the old Ecker, said one night how the reporters were there very quickly to meet him when he came in at some point in his flights, and he's describing this. And I went back and looked at stuff, and it's given the time period. Nowadays, it wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
But for the time period, what was going on, and how quick this story got picked up, and how quickly it went, and his description it went on. And it's interesting how he talks about saucers, but what he drew much more of a flying wing type looking vehicle that he had on there. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting one. I think when you take those two 1947 events and the whole term that saucer was thrown in there, I find it interesting. And of course, that part of the country has an incredible amount of historical activity that's been talked about, and many theories, underground bases, all kinds of activity around it. And of course, we have the link up. It's a prodigious area for the Yeti, Bigfoot, Sasquatch activity, which seems to go hand in hand. So, what do you think of Mr. Arnold's
I think it was our stuff, and I'll tell you why. Being a World War II aviation enthusiast, you've already mentioned Operation Paperclip. For those who aren't familiar, it was the end stages of World War II, and it was a race between the Soviets and us to see who could grab the most German scientists and bring them over to work on our stuff. At the time, Germany had a number of very interesting aircraft in development. One was it the Gotha, Horten Gotha, that was supposed to be ultimately, if the war had continued, their flying wing aircraft that was going to bomb New York in some way. They had a way to extend the range. They had the flying wing.
Right, the Arado. I think you're also referring to the Arado. That's the other one. The
Arado was the first jet bomber that actually did see service. Right. But it was not so much a flying wing. That was more of a cigar shape with a high wing and a pair of jet engines slung under each wing. These were true flying wing aircraft.
And also I think it was Dornier. I can't remember who. It was the brothers. It's going to come to me in a second.
Yeah, the Horten. I think it was the Horten brothers. Yeah,
Horten.
Yeah. That's the aircraft that I'm talking about. And they had two prototypes built of this thing.
Yep.
And it wasn't very long after that we had our first flying wing bomber. I remember its movie appearance in the first movie of War of the Worlds.
Right.
It was the one that dropped the atomic
bomb.
The
B-47.
Yeah.
No. Hold on. I want to say 49. And now I got to think back to it, because that's the Northrop's. And the main problem that all those planes had was we didn't have the onboard computer technology to control
Stability.
with conventional airfoils.
Now the Germans also had a delta wing. Let's call it a tri-delta wing. And if for science fiction fans, envision Battlestar Galactica, the Colonial Viper fighter, but with longer 3 wings and a shorter snout. Right. And there's one of these is at the Aviation Museum, War. I forget what it's called. It's that War Aviation Museum in Virginia Beach. Excellent museum.
Yep.
If you ever get a chance to see that, and they have one of these things. And if those types of things were brought over here in 1945, give our defense contractors an opportunity to reverse engineer and to put some things together to see what'll fly. You're right in that 1947 time frame. Sure. And of course, in the Pacific Northwest is where we have Boeing, and we have some other builders out there. I think Lockheed Martin was in California at the time, that might have been trying out some of this tech. And as you've observed, Commander, the problem with stability in that platform without computer assist can be challenging. And even during the war, there was Chance Vaught, who made the famous Gullwing Corsair fighter. They had something called that was nicknamed the Flying Pancake.
Yep.
And that was a twin engine. It was a disc, let's face it, with a couple of
very short takeoff.
Yeah, very short takeoff. It flew well and performed well, but it really didn't offer any advantage to existing aerial platforms at the time. And it only had a top speed in the 300s, I think, at a time when our fighter planes like the P-51 were going 439 or something like that. Right. And so it was abandoned ultimately. But people around those testing areas were reporting these flying saucers, and it was the flying flapjack being flight tested. So that's why I tend to believe that Mr. Arnold's sighting was our stuff.
All right, number 3 is one of the great ones, the Phoenix Lights, 1997. Now, I don't know the criteria how they set this list up in the order, but this one is an amazing one. I've been blessed to interview a couple people that were witnesses to this. I don't have a good explanation. I think the dropping flares thing was purposely done as a throw the attention off part of the process that they did later. It has a lot of looks to the flying activities that are seen in the Hudson River Valley. To me, the description, that classic boomerang type shape that's on there, the lights that were on there, the silence of it. And I have had in the past people that were on my previous show that talked about this and said this was our technology flying. That it was, and the person that was on my show at the time explained just how these sightings were occurring, almost a regular schedule of it kind of fit a test flight program. You're planning Monday, you're setting it up on Tuesday, you're doing your dry run on Wednesday, you fly it on Thursday, and now it's the weekend. So you have to get all the data in, you're collapsing everything down, and then you get ready for the following week. And that's very true. Until you get to some breakthrough point, you tend to follow that kind of a pattern. Very, very traditional pattern. A lot of interesting there. I think it's a classical example, again, of misdirection, people talking out their hat and talking about another orifice, all kind, I think, intentionally done. I think people that don't know what they're talking about, fed stuff to go out there to stand in front of the camera in a uniform. And then you have just a frenzy that goes on with the media. But some of the people that were involved with this are some pretty, what I would say, pretty squared away folks, what they experienced. And their descriptions bear, a respectful analysis of what they're saying. And again, on this one, I can't tell you. I tend to lean on this one that I think it is our technology, but I can't, where I have almost, I'm certain on Tic-Tac, I couldn't tell you on this one. But I think it's incredible. Your thoughts on Phoenix Lights?
Like you, I'm leaning toward ours, but there are some things about this that really, I don't want to say bother me, but intrigue me.
Mm-hmm.
The first is the sheer size, the whole scope of that. The idea that a craft that large, if it was one single craft, could appear over a large American metropolis without active interception on the part of our military, without, people reporting escorting helicopters or jets in the vicinity. If it was something that was not ours, then it has to be one of the most troubling UAP sites ever. Now, I know for a time, and you would know better than I, Commander, there was some experimentation with incredibly large dirigible type craft.
Combinations of both, where you had propulsion, as you said, a dirigible, but in this shape. And there are some very famous ones that were reported over Europe doing reconnaissance work that were simply amazing. Loiter times are just incredible with this. Not very fast, silent for the most part, using electric drives to propel it. Very, very interesting work. I would give a lot to have the inside peek at some of those things that are going on. I don't think those systems are flying now. I don't think that they're active now. But I think at the time and some of the things that were going forward, that definitely was going on. And anybody who's listening, Spin Up Popular Science and Popular Mechanics, PM did incredible exposés on the possibilities of that.
Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at on that.
All right, so any guess for number 4? Rendlesham.
Okay. I have that number 2.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the ordering on this, but Rendlesham. Obviously, we have been blessed with John and his firsthand accounts and his lifelong journey with this. And I've been blessed with a friendship with him for a number of years. There's so many dimensions to this story. I think the latest kind of conclusions that John has put forward really do touch upon, because I think John's at the point, I don't want to speak for him, but I think he's at the point where he doesn't really care anymore what it is. He's seeing the entire phenomena as a collected situation and all the things that went on. The activities that were going on in that part of England were Area 51 type things, much like Dugway, much like what goes down in Autek. We talk about Area 51 and the box and everything at Nellis. You have all the areas around the ranges. You've got China Lake. The reason that we have submarines and a nuclear sub research facility up in a deep lake in Idaho, because during World War II they needed the depth, but they also needed the security to make sure that it wasn't easily to be spied upon. So this inland lake that does this, and there's a lot of activity goes on there, and the Atomic Energy Commission has stuff. And this is very close to where Mr. Arnold saw his activities in that whole particular part. Mm-hmm. It's easy to look at that and start seeing pieces line up. Mm-hmm. Rendlesham to me is our technology or terrestrial technology. I think that there was a lot of activities going on. The kinds of things that John and others with him experienced and have suffered through gives me connections to a lot of other reports where people have experienced, the loggers and the hikers that are out there, and they see these vehicles and they see the lights and they get hit with the beam of light. And then they have all these medical issues that come on, losing hair, losing teeth, which has that typical kind of almost overexposure or a very acute exposure to a radiation particular part of it. Mm-hmm. And I think this might be the difference between what we experience with a Tic-Tac and maybe an earlier attempt at doing this kind of capabilities, these drives. And again, if people have the opportunity, just look at atomic-driven airplanes and some of the things that they were toying with to go do. That the attractiveness of having a nuclear or an atomic-powered airplane that didn't need fuel and could stay in the air indefinitely longer than the crew could do that. The problem was the exhaust issues that were coming out were going to take out a large swath of the country if we ever launched the airplane. It's going to kill people on the ground because of what it was. But they were past the point of just doing this in plans. They were actually putting parts and pieces of this thing together. It's incredible because when the threat level was high enough, the motivation was going to be high enough. Your thoughts on Rendlesham, sir?
I have recently heard authors of 2 new books on the subject interview. One is a gal who worked as a law enforcement person in the area and has since retiring as a major, spent a lot of time in paranormal investigation and researching the history of the area. And it is a hot spot, not just for UAP, but for ghost and spirit contact. And
I think all of the UK falls into that category. I've never met a group of people that seems to be so comfortable with the intersection of this realm and all the other realms.
Yes, and that's why Commander Straker and Shadow built their headquarters there in England.
Correct.
Yeah.
I know the reference you're making, so you think you're going to get away with that.
And so she reported on cryptid sightings in the area, and it's what we would call a UAP hotspot, like the Hudson Valley that you mentioned earlier here. So it was some weird stuff was happening before the famous incident, and some things have apparently been happening since. The author of this other book claims to be revealing heretofore untold things about the incident. And one incident in his book is that there was a woman, part of the security detail, who was chased as she was responding by a cryptid at the time that the event was going on, running alongside her car, even as she was exceeding 50 miles an hour, to the point where she rolled her vehicle, and even according to his report, got some shots off at this thing, and that is supposedly new information. Also, he claims that when John and the others were encountering this thing, that some of the men have reported seeing in their vicinity what we would describe now as grays, or petite aliens with large heads and so forth. But lately, I've been doing a lot of thinking about this, Commander, and I'm beginning to wonder what kind of technology would be involved in some type of a weapons platform, be it directed energy. I mean, we've heard about Havana syndrome, where thoughts and visions could be projected into somebody's mind as part of the deception effort to cover up something else that's going on.
Well, I sent all of you that interesting article, and you had a kind of an "oh my God" response to it, where the pilot that was airborne over one of the detonations when they were doing atomic testing.
Yes,
and he experienced that thing, which has been reported by a number of people, where he could see through the bottom of the airplane. He had an eye patch on. He ducked his head down. The bright light went through it. And then whatever he experienced, but he had this description that he could see the ground, and he described what he could see. Now, it could be just a hallucination. That could be part of it, but that could be part that was induced by the detonation and what was going on. But this has been reported a number of times.
So let me take this a step further. Throughout history, we've had reports of people testifying to invasions of their bedroom at night by demonic entities, used to be called incubus and succubus back, in Middle-aged times and so forth. Now we have these beings that are different. I think that in the olden days, it was probably demonic. And some of what's going on now, I believe, is demonic. But if there was a way to project things appearing as they're not, and what you do is you would test it on supposed nobodies, people who don't have a dog in the fight, UAP wise, maybe don't care one way or the other, maybe they live in a remote area or something like that, and you're making them see something, maybe delving into their psyche of fear, or maybe you just have a select program of things that you can project. And I'm not saying they're not being taken and not being abused. What I'm saying is that experience has been created for them. And I think the uniformity of what happens in a lot of these experiences might testify to a pre-planned program. I know some would say, well, if we're living in a simulation, that's easy.
Right.
I don't think that's the case. But this opens up a whole new realm of warfare. And, unfortunately, who's going to get tested on first? Probably troops, probably our own guys. You go into it thinking, well, it's not going to hurt them. Let's just kind of see what it does. And then something goes wrong, and there's burns, or there's skin damage, or cancer later. Sometimes these experiments have bad things go awry. But I just think that it's probably something that is top secret that we don't know about. What do you think about that idea of projecting vision?
I agree with you completely. And I also believe that the underlying concept that you're talking about is part of the problem. This is what makes me fearful about things like AI. The road to hell is paved in good intentions. I know, because I've worked on the project a few times in my life. I've laid some of the pavement down. And then if you have anybody who doesn't have a moral compass of any kind, they can very rapidly go into it, into areas they don't. And since you and I agree on this particular area, I believe the evil one uses those opportunities. So all that stuff's there, and I can see that actually coming up. All right, we're winding down the show, and I want to get through all 10. Number 5, we won't spend much time on it. It's on this list. It's the Tic-Tac UFO.
Ours.
Yeah, we really beat that one to death.
Yep.
1952, number 6, the Washington, D.C. UFO incident. Don has talked a lot about this one. What amazes me about this one, and I as a kid, remember this coming up around the 10th anniversary and then around the 20th anniversary of this. It was also popular fodder for a lot of the different types of movies and television shows, the pulp books that were coming out about this. The activity over DC. I don't think we've ever actually had a very good explanation. I think temperature inversions is just on it. I don't have much to add. I think Don has done a really good job talking about this one. This one makes me pause. You?
Okay. Again, I'm wondering about ours, and here's why. When this occurred, hadn't Mr. Eisenhower been elected president? Wasn't he president at the time?
I believe so.
Okay. We know his attitudes toward the military-industrial complex. He warned us about that in his departure speech as president. We know that as a man who had seen war, he was very acquainted with the horrors of war and wanted to avoid it at all costs. He helped us get out of the Korean War. It ended in somewhat of an armistice or temporary peace. But in any case, maybe a shot across the bow from the defense industrial complex to say, we're watching you. This is what we can do. Be careful.
Okay. I'm gonna part with you a little bit on that one. I don't. But I think you raise at least a valid point. Number 7, the Westall incident. This is outside Melbourne, Australia. I've actually flown right by this area where this occurred. Number of school children, upwards of 200 students and staff saw this. Witnessed the sausage-shaped craft taking off and landing in a nearby field. It's left a lasting impact, and it's another one outside of Australia that has really dropped off. But it's it's a mass sighting. Mm-hmm. Any reaction to that one?
Well, very similar to the Ariel incident in Africa.
Yep.
And the appearance of beings to children.
Right, which was something that they incorporated in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, if you remember correctly.
Yeah, I'm going to put that in unknown at this point.
Okay. All right. One of my favorites. We have a lot of audience that have written me about it. We really do have to press Don to lead us on this one because he has some detailed stuff. The Battle of Los Angeles, 1942, number 8. It's been ridiculed. There is more there than has been passed out. I am not convinced that this one is just hysteria driving this to the point that it went. Your thoughts?
Well, we know that the Japanese had been launching balloons off their submarines with bombs on them.
And also from the all the way from the mainland.
And I think that perhaps something like that might have triggered an initial response. And of course, in a land when we're already tense, the West Coast is on high alert for a potential Japanese invasion. Once one gun goes off, they're all going to go off. So that's my thought on that.
Well, I think that's a fair interpretation. There's still some underlining parts of it that just throw me off. Okay. 1967, Shag Harbor, not too far from where I'm talking from tonight. Another body of water I've flown over there. This is the Nova Scotia sighting. And at one point, there was quite a bit of activity from Nova Scotia down the coast of Maine, all the way into Massachusetts, of course, with the Exeter and Leominster and other places. Thoughts?
This is the one where supposedly there was a craft underwater.
Right. Or it looked like it crashed. And then they searched. And, of course, the big thing is that it was always officially classified as a UFO.
Yeah, and the divers in that case encountered beings that weren't human under the water. And so that one I would rank very high on my unsolved, not human category.
I agree as well. The part that bothers me about this, given the time period that we're talking, late 60s, what's available in hard report is not doesn't quite line up and match up with me. Okay, last one, and we're coming up towards the end of the show. The Chicago O'Hare UFO sightings. We're talking about 2006. This was the United Airlines employees and pilots seeing disc-shaped objects hovering all over Chicago O'Hare International Airport. I actually had, when I had the previous show, a listener who said he was there when it happened and described things that went on. And then he went on to describe he no longer lived in that part of the country. He had moved to the Southwest. And he felt that he had seen similar things almost to the point that at times he questioned if it was following him. Which, based on our guest last week, that and others that I've heard had talk about things that they remember when they were younger and then they experience when they're older. And there seems to be like a tag on them. That they have a connection to it and it does reoccur or it does continue to come up. Your thoughts on the Chicago sightings of 2006, almost like Ghostbusters, the something rip of 1892.
So, to my mind, certainly one of the most dangerous sightings. When you have unidentified objects appearing in the pattern of one of the busiest airports in America, unannounced, and nobody knows what it is, that is an aviation hazard that has absolutely got to be solved. I mean, we need to figure out how that happened, because from what I understand, that's not the only time that's happened in the open place. We've
had it in Newark. We've had it in New York. Now, a lot of those later ones that you see coming on definitely are UAP drone type activities. There are people that are misbehaving or are nefarious activities doing things. There are things happening there. There's no doubt about that. The thing about this one is it just never seems to be fully resolved to me.
Yes.
Because the nature of what you're talking about is that serious.
Yeah, it's certainly a threat to life. I mean, we've seen some strange things happen around airports. Was it a couple of years ago? There was a guy in a jetpack flying around the LAX pattern.
Yep.
You know, people seeing a man outside their window, and it's not.
Well, my all-time favorite was the guy that took the balloons and put them to the lawn chair.
And had an air pistol to descend.
Yeah. And his idea was that he would shoot a couple of them. He got so high that he passed out. This was in Southern California. PSA Airlines was still flying in those days. They reported they just saw a guy go by in a lawn chair, and everybody just paused on the radio. And he survived. He survived, and God bless him. And and there's a whole sport out there of using small balloons to do this.
Yes,
there is a sport out there. People with baskets, and they have an array of small balloons. It's very popular. A lot of people. I think one of the most favorite trips is to go from UK to mainland Europe. Go across the channel, and because the prevailing wind, and it takes 45 minutes, stuff like that, and go do that. What could go wrong? You're laughing. Padre, you're laughing. Like all I need is you to give the cross. All right, we're coming down. We're down to the last minute. God's peace that surpasses all knowledge and understanding. Thank you so much. Please drop us the emails. Please support the station. I hope you're excited as I am about what we have coming up with John Burroughs and Skywatcher and this production that we have coming up. It's going to be tremendous. Padre, I'll leave it to you for the final step.
Well, it certainly has been a pleasure, Commander. I always learn a ton when we have these conversations on or off air. And judging from the feedback that we've gotten in our comments section, that's a program that has been appreciated. And people want more of our analysis of historical stuff. So we'll have to see what we can do about that.
They are the greatest audience on the planet. Thank you for supporting us, and thanks for listening.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.